Anyways, it is May 14th, in case you were wondering, Mother's Day 2023. Greg Blair, one of our longtime members and supporters, and usually is with our group that meets in person monthly, recently had an extended trip to Africa. Greg, was it 3 months?
4 months.
4 months to Africa. So he went all over the place and still didn't see everything. Never even got to Timbuktu, which is in Africa and apparently way out there, because that's what we say when something's far away, it's in Timbuktu. He sent us some photos and sent me some photos, and I shared those with an earlier presentation. So he sent me a lot more photos, and now that he's back, he can narrate. I should say too, Greg is formerly a truck driver, and he drove all across the U.S. and Canada, 6 million miles between 1975 and 2011. That's a lot of miles, but of course, he had to keep good records and so forth. A truck driver is not just somebody that gets in the truck and drives, but he's got to keep all these records and comply with all these rules, maintain the speed limit, right? Greg always drove the speed limit or under, so that was always good. And Greg's background is that his family tried to raise him as a Methodist, apparently not too hard, or he's just too hard-headed, because he just never really could swallow it very well. At about age 50, he realized that, yes, I'm an atheist, and he kind of had to kiss away that feeling that there was a big sky daddy looking out for him all the time, and felt like he wanted to get that feeling back, but on the other hand, the other feelings he got from it were worthwhile, and he wanted to continue on as he has, and doesn't think it'd probably be possible for somebody who comes to that realization to go back to God belief. And of course, we are church, Church of Freethought. We say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness can be put together with the idea that religion is your total reaction upon life. So why can't atheists have a church? Of course they can. What we think about God and all these religious questions is very much a religion for us. We don't really believe in things as much as probably the other traditional religions. Our goal is really to believe in as few things as possible, and that might change how you think about belief, but we think it's better to not believe in things that are wrong than to always trying to figure out what you can believe. And it's okay to be content in believing something for now, and behaving as if something is true, because as long as you can change your mind, that's a feature, not a bug, as we say. Thinking, far better than belief, because belief is thinking is how we arrive at beliefs. And if you don't arrive at beliefs by thinking, if you just paste faith over it, that's not a good belief. We always say you can't think when you're believing, you can't believe when you're thinking. Those two things are kind of opposites. Not that you don't do both, but if you place any kind of value on thinking, then you have to set belief aside at that time. Here's the most important, utterly undeniable and consequential truth of existence, and I have to say, I hear people saying this all the time, but this is the freethinker's prayer: I don't know. You can't say that about most everything, then again, you need to re-examine your premises. So this is part 2. There's Greg on the right and Africa on the left, and Greg's going to go ahead and narrate here as I go through here. Greg, when you want the next slide, just say next slide, or if there's a pause and it seems like you're done, I'll go on to the next slide, okay?
Okay, thank you.
And I may interject, and Greg and I talked about this ahead of time, so if I interject, it's not because I'm interrupting Greg. He said he would like to have that help, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum. So,
well, the way that I ended up going to Africa for 4 months is that I have an identical twin, and we've been getting together for vacations for many years, because we live 1,200 miles apart. And so travel has been our way to spend time together. And my brother just now retired, and to start his retirement off, he's the one that said, let's go for 4 months. And I said, how about 3 months? And he said, well, I'm going to go for 4 months and you can fly home early. And I said, never mind, I'll go with you. So we started out at the west corner of Africa in Morocco, and we spent December traveling around Morocco, which I just loved. And it's, of course, an Arab. It's a desert country too. A lot of rocks, not so much trees, kind of like a hardscape with rocks. And the Sahara Desert begins around the edge, the border of Morocco and Algeria. And Sub-Sahara is where we spent most of our holiday. From the northwest corner of Morocco, we flew to the southeast corner, to Johannesburg, Kruger National Park, Mozambique, and two tiny little countries that are part of really within South Africa is Eswatini and Lesotho down at the south. And from there, we flew to Ethiopia and then to Uganda and joined an overland tour for 2.5 months of our trip was with a group of about 25 people, mostly youngsters in their 20s, Europeans, Australia, and a few Americans, but Europeans travel a lot more than we do. And what was really significant about this trip is it was on the ground, driving over some amazing roads with potholes bigger than the bus we were in, and a lot of animals and people. Their national highways were sometimes dirt, but we met wonderful people. And I expected it to be dangerous with not only animals, but perhaps terrorism and us spotting rich tourists in their eyes. The average income in the world is below $2 a day. So as a matter of fact, Africans look at white people and consider any white person as rich, because white people make up less than 0.5% of all Africa. And yet what we found was people waving, yelling greetings at us, not anger, just happy, like, we see you, cheerful. And the food, the traditions, and of course the big game animals, the big five. So when you look on that map, you can see where the Sahara Desert is up north, and in the south is the other great desert. The world's oldest desert is the Namib Desert, which the country of Namibia was named after the Namib Desert. And in between is Sub-Sahara, and it is mountainous and jungles, and there are animals everywhere. In fact, even in the Namib Desert, there's animals just out in the middle. You're wondering, what are they eating? But they do find things. The picture of me right there is on the Sahara Desert in Morocco, and we went to a tent camp. They weren't little camping tents; they were giant tents that could house probably 10 people in each one, with full-size beds. They had a shower with one water heater for the camp. That they had a fire belt under the water heater, so it was kind of a manual hot water, and they had enough electricity to pump the water. And they ran a little generator to give us a few lights at night, and I think their cooking was over a fire. In fact, most of our cooking was over fires. Tim, so we start the pictures?
Yeah, I'll just add that Africa, in case you didn't know, is the second largest continent after Asia, and the poorest continent. In fact, the lowest, least GDP per capita of the bottom 24 nations are all in Africa, and that is thought to be due to disease burden, malnutrition, and that in turn is due to a lot of corruption, a history of colonialism, despite the fact that Africa is full of natural resources. It's been estimated to have the majority of the world's gold, platinum, also things like tantalum and other rare earth elements that are used in electronics and those kinds of things. So it's an amazing place of contrasts.
Yeah, there's 54 countries in Africa.
Yeah. And I guess If you want to see elephants, they're all over the place in Africa, huh?
Yes, they are. They're not really friendly. They're one of the big five of that kill humans, and it's of course out of fear. You know, they want to protect themselves and protect their families, so they're not something you'd want to go up and pet. But we did see many of them and pretty close. Yeah, go ahead and keep. Yep. Yeah.
Getting a drink of water.
Yeah. Often you'd see 8 or 10 of them together in families. The males would have a fight as to who the king is, the big bull, and when they get too old to win the fight, they end up getting run off from the group. And so sometimes you'd see a huge male all by himself, and he was just an old timer that's been kicked out of the family. So these
They
pictures,
came up pretty.
yes. A lot of grass and savanna, scrub brush. And of course, in those trees and bushes, a lot of animals that you don't see, like the lions and rhinos and both of those are in the big five that'll kill you. Another one of the big five is the hippo, which is a grass eater, but they'll kill you because of fear that you're going to kill them.
Here's two having what, a disagreement, you think, Greg?
I think they're teenagers that are probably just playing. If they were really fighting to see who gets to be the bull, then I think we'd see a lot more blood. They were just horsing around.
That's a gorgeous shot. I will just also mention to people as they're looking at these, some of these photos are really well composed. They have a foreground and framing using available vegetation and so forth. So I don't know whether you took a lot of these or your brother took a lot of these, Greg, but really some great shots in here.
Thank you. I took them all with my cell phone.
Oh, gee. Well, pretty good job considering a lot of times you're probably just whizzing by.
Yes.
There's a classic African, I mean,
Okay.
imagine that as a drawing, make a great shirt for Africa, and then you see there's elephants on the ground here, so it's still about elephants.
Yeah, that's an acacia tree, that flat top.
This looks a little alarming.
Yes, the safari jeep, this was in South Africa at Kruger National Park. Actually, to be more specific, there are some private reserves right around Kruger that were even better than Kruger itself, because in Kruger they have to stay on the roads, the dirt roads, and in the private reserves they're allowed to go off the roads, and the rangers keep track of where the animals are. So, and they have their walkie-talkies, so they'd say, go over to grid A15, and we just go right down a trail and go trailblazing, make our own. So we could get right up close and personal. And you'd have a driver in the Jeep, and then there was a spotter that they had this chair out on the grill in front of the vehicle. So he's actually sitting right in front of the radiator. And they do it every day. These guides do at least a couple times a day. So he knew what he was doing, but man, when we saw this group of elephants, they drive right into it and get right up maybe 10 feet away. And I'm thinking, isn't that elephant going to charge? And I don't think I'd want to be that spotter that's right out in front, but he wasn't afraid at all. So I could tell it, okay, if they're not afraid, why should I be?
So here's a series of really amazing pictures.
Yeah, I think that's Botswana. To me, it looks like Southern California, a lot of the big boulders and rolling mountains, a lot of vegetation. This is the side of a mountain. Oh, I can't quite remember where it is, but those are crops. Yeah, I can't
Looks
remember.
like they're on a too. It's not really terraced.
Yeah, little trails for walking on, and there are a lot of tea farms. Not a lot. In some areas, there's a lot of tea farms, and those might be tea, but I'm not sure. But it is all farmed. That's rice. This was in Namibia. That's agave. It's a plant. They don't make tequila. They were making something else out of their agave. Again, Botswana and their giant boulders.
Kind of wonder what the geology is, how that forms, because they look pretty rounded and weathered. I mean, it doesn't look like they just broke off of the cliffs yesterday or even 100 years ago.
They were.
Unlike the
We
American West.
We Googled that, and they were shoved up from underneath. There are some plateaus that look like a section of it had just dropped, maybe 100 feet, but in fact, the ones that were higher were shoved up from underneath. This is Zanzibar, a lovely island. It used to be an independent country. It's about probably 50 miles off the coast of Tanzania. We took a ferry boat to get there. And Tanzania has adopted Zanzibar. I think Zanzibar is now part of Tanzania, but it was an independent country until not so long ago. And fishing and tourism is their primary economy. So I think what I was showing in that picture, this is Morocco here, is the vast, like in America, you cross a state line in America and the topography just changes, and much that way in Africa too. They had mountain ranges and deserts and flat savanna, and just anything we have, they have in Africa. So this is the mountains. It actually looked like Uganda. And this was it's a town in Morocco, but we've seen some movies that they've filmed right there. There were at least 3 movie studios in the Atlas Mountains, and a lot of movies that you would recognize. They've done at least some portions of their filming in Morocco. Morocco is very tourist friendly. You felt really welcome in Morocco.
Greg, do people live in those windows, those buildings?
Yes. Yeah, it's the city. Yeah. This is Namibia. Looks like a bit like Arizona or Utah.
Yeah, sedimentary rock for sure.
Yep. I think this is South Africa, this cheetah. We were up close and personal to many animals, and we're really not on their menu. When our guides would be sitting out in front of the Jeep as an appetizer, they're not alarmed. So, and the animals are so used to the Jeeps driving around watching them that they just totally ignore us. We came upon a female lion that was frozen, holding still, trying to watch a group of impala. And then she charged, and she got an impala in a matter of a couple of seconds, and another female lion appeared from nowhere, and we watched them kill this impala. The impala squealed like maybe a cat or a rabbit would squeal when they've been attacked, and it lasted for a few seconds, and then it was quiet, and they just ripped her apart. So it was.
We showed that photo last time.
Yeah, it was quick. She didn't suffer long, a few seconds. This is in Lesotho. high up in the mountains. Their lowest altitude is about 1 mile high, and which is the highest, lowest altitude of any country. And their highest altitude is about 2 miles. So they don't have giant mountains. They're on a mountain top. And basically they raise livestock, sheep and goats. And they originally went there to escape the Maasai warriors, to be sheltered from getting, chased down. So now Lesotho is their own little country surrounded by South Africa.
Greg, was there enough food for the animals, for the service animals, or did the horses look malnourished? Or
A lot of them look thin. Yeah, you can see their ribs. The zebras were nice and fat, but horses and donkeys are more prevalent than horses. They just graze. I don't think they raise alfalfa and hay. They basically just graze. But they had a lot of energy. Same with dogs. You see stray dogs and they look skinny, but they had a lot of energy, so they weren't just suffering. This is Namibia, where the sand dunes are. Those sand dunes are the biggest in the world and the oldest sand dunes in the world. And it's just the dunes are just one small part of the Namib Desert. I think that particular one was Dune 45, which is famous for its colors. This is called Deadvlei. It's a small dry lake, not big at all, but the trees there are approximately 900-year-old. They've been dead for about 900 years. And where the white sand is, it's so dry that the trees don't even decay. Whereas on the colorful sand in the background, there are some green bushes growing. And I understand they're not reaching down with roots into underground water. They are instead being fed by moisture in the air, the humidity. And so just that close together, it's so dry the trees won't rot, and yet there's green plants that grow from the moisture. And this little dry lake, Salvador Dali went and visited, and that's where he got his inspiration for the melting clocks. It was a beautiful temperature. In fact, my whole 4 months in Africa, we had wonderful weather. The climate ranged from the upper 40s to the lower 80s, generally 50s and 60s. And we only had about 3 days that we even got any rain, one rainy day. So we just had perfect weather. But I think when it's hot in Deadvlei, it gets very hot. And Salvador Dali had his painting of the melting clocks, and this is where he was inspired. The colors vary from the different minerals. So as the winds blow in different funnels, they carry different minerals, and that's how they've come to be so colorful and varied in color. Of course, the red is iron. It's oxidation, it's rust. When you get close to it, it just looks like normal sand, only orange sand. It doesn't look like chips of metal, but that's what the rust is the iron. So the sand dunes below we just saw was Namibia. This is back in Morocco. We rode camels the last 5 miles to our tent camp. And camels are not a real friendly animal. And the saddles in them were incredibly uncomfortable. They were like a wooden pallet with blankets under the pallet. So the camel's comfortable, but boy, you're sitting on a wooden box. It was terrible, but it was still fun. This is the world's second largest canyon. I believe it's called Fish River Canyon, and it's in Namibia. The world's largest canyon, of course, is our own Grand Canyon. And this looked much the same, but not as much color. The Grand Canyon has more colors. I can remember orange and purple, and here you can see it's a lot more brown, but still pretty breathtaking, and hardly anybody there. In fact, the whole country of Namibia, which is a large area of space, only has, I think, 2.5 million people. And out here at the canyon, it's no, hardly anybody. You see a few tourists, not many. Also Namibia, that was an area where they did film movies there also. Those are oryx, and we ate oryx steaks, and they were mighty good. There's a lot of cattle in Africa and a lot of beef. Throughout most of the world, chicken is everywhere, but I didn't see hardly any chickens in Africa, but a lot of cattle. And filet mignons generally in a restaurant cost roughly a $10 filet mignon dinner, so we had quite a few of them. And big game like oryx, impala, kudu, zebra, springbok, crocodile, even ostrich. Those dinners would be less expensive than beef. So we get a fabulous big game dinner for about $8. Ostrich was quite a surprise because I was expecting turkey or chicken, and not at all. Ostrich looks like beef. And when they brought my brother and I our ostrich dinner, we said, "You got the wrong table. We ordered ostrich." And they said, "This is ostrich." It looked like a sirloin, and it tastes like a sirloin.
I guess this is uncategorizable, but fun nevertheless.
Yeah, this is a crowned crane, and it is Uganda's national bird, and it's on their flag. So if you saw a flag of Uganda and there's a little bird on it, this is the bird that they and he was wild. I mean, he's not in captivity. We just came across him out in the open. Typical African bus or migrant workers, but so often the trucks would be going down the road with people just sitting up on top. And sometimes they were the great big 18-wheelers with 6 people sitting up on the cab. I think they might have actually been the guys that are going to unload the truck when they get somewhere. We saw one dump truck about the size of this truck and 2 guys filling it up with a shovel. Like, couldn't they get a bobcat and fill it up in 20 minutes? How long would it take to fill this truck up with a shovel, with big, assuming it was a dump truck with big sides? All day or 2 days? But manpower is cheap and equipment is expensive. The price of gasoline was generally $4 to $7 a gallon after I translate it from their liters to dollars. We saw a lot of women with the baskets on their roof, sometimes water, sometimes a product they're taking to market. Often it looked heavy, but it's just what they do. They go upstairs and on trails, and they can use their hands doing other things while they're still balancing these things on their head. And their clothes too. I love their colorful clothes and houses that we'll see. One street in Morocco. Usually they probably are twice as wide as this, but there are plenty of them. And this isn't just squeezing between 2 houses. This is their actual walkway and the vehicles. On this particular walkway, you would see motor scooters squeezing through there. If it was twice as wide, you'd see donkey carts or handheld carts, like a giant wheelbarrow full of products, and people, it's just their way of life, squeezing through there.
I would title this one claustrophobia.
Yeah. If you look up towards the top of the picture, you see the connectors, and that's to keep the walls from falling in on each other. It
Oh,
it
thank
probably,
goodness.
yeah, yeah, if the wall started leaning, they'd build those kind of connectors to hold them up. I loved his clothes. Just a typical Moroccan. Yeah, cats just taking their afternoon nap. They're, of course, they're nocturnal, and so during the daytime they're getting some shut eye. They open their eyes and look at us. So it'd be like if somebody tried to wake you up in the middle of a nap, they'd wake up and look at us. They were never afraid. Wherever the safari jeeps were, they knew that we weren't going to hunt them, so they just stay there. And we might be 10 feet away from them, sometimes even closer. It scared me more than it scared them. Hippos. This is a group. A lot of times hippos, you'll see 50 of them in a pod, and little babies there with the parents. They stay in the water at daytime, and at night is when they go, because they don't have much fur, so they get sunburned, and so they'll use their tail and their mouth to throw mud up on themselves, but at night is when they go grazing. Back up to Morocco, vendors selling their placemats and ornaments, and this kid his family was right there. I just love the colors. And of course, you can see that there's a lot of green vegetation. Morocco has a lot of the nomads that still today they'll go south to the desert in the wintertime because they get snow in the Atlas Mountains, and they'll go north into the mountains, which is where this is, all the grass, in the summer. And they don't have a house, they have a giant tent or multiple giant tents, and they'll set them up for maybe a month at a time. And you'll see a flock of sheep, maybe of 500 sheep, that'll be just grazing, and then they'll, when the grass is gone, they'll pick up their tents and go north another probably 50 miles and set their tents down again. And so this is a typical valley in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. This is rock paintings. It's 50,000 to 60,000 years old. At the place we went to, which is, I just looked it up this morning, Zimbabwe. It's in Zimbabwe. Our guide said that there are rock paintings as old as 200,000 years old, but these are 50 to 60,000. They're made with ground up minerals and mud and human feces. Apparently, feces, mud, and minerals will survive time. It's in a cave. If it had been out exposed to more of the elements, it probably would not have survived. The cave is not deep. It's probably 50 feet deep at the deepest. And it tells about their life. You can see campfires and tools, and just tells about their life when they were there. This is in Marrakesh. I just love the beauty of the colors. Just a typical homes. I walked up that, it's a dead end, and each house had a door knocker and a name. So those are houses about 3 or 4 stories tall.
Color on the tiles too.
Yes. Yeah, and the whole neighborhood, I guess, got together and selected that indigo color. Yep, this is a typical way of travel for the business people. For their there were a lot of scooters and a few Cushmans and tuk-tuks, but just as many donkey carts. And you'd see donkey carts out in traffic on the busy main highways. They'll be right out there also. sometimes carrying ice with a blanket over the ice for delivery.
When you're in a town like this, do you hear call to prayer happening throughout the day?
Yes. And it's at particular times, I believe 5 times a day, but let's say 10 a.m. is one of their regular times. Well, you'll hear multiple minuets doing their call to prayer. And it's really quite beautiful. When they do it at 5 a.m., it's a little annoying if you're close to the minuet, but it is a beautiful thing, their call to prayer. Yep. Mama and baby, baboons. This was in a place, the baboons were in a place where we were pitching our tents, and as soon as we showed up and started getting all our tents out, they scattered, but they'll pick up anything you leave out for them. They'll run off with it or try to eat it. And so this picture here, I was actually going for the price of gas in the distance there, but the carriage came along and I thought, well, I like that too. This is in Marrakesh, Morocco, one of my favorite cities.
So would the writing on the truck there be in Arabic, or what language? It looks like maybe what language?
I think probably Arabic, maybe English as well. I don't know because I can't zoom in on it right now. I can see the Arabic for sure, but it looks like another language also, and probably English. The British colonized an awful lot of Africa, so English was quite widely spoken. On Western Africa, the French colonized it, and French is predominant in a small portion of Africa, but English is quite widespread, and a lot of people speak English there.
I see a lot of donkeys and horses. Is there a manure problem on the highways?
No, and I don't know. They might have had a tarp right behind the horses to catch it, but there wasn't a lot of manure around. Bananas, very many bananas are one of their common foods everywhere, and plantains. In Rwanda, they make banana beer, and it's about 15% alcohol. It's mixed with molasses, and it's a real heavy drink, almost like it tastes like banana juice with molasses in it, and boy, it has a kick. You can't drink very much of it, and at first you either love it or hate it, and after a few sips of it, it's just kind of like, I don't think I want to drink anymore. But some of the young bloods in our group would drink a whole 6-pack of it. Like, are you crazy? And they'd still be drunk the next day.
Wonder if you can get it on Amazon.
I don't know. Banana beer. I don't know. So Lesotho, the highest, lowest altitude. And we went up that dirt road. There's it crosses the border about halfway through there, and there's both countries have their border checkpoint there, and immigration and customs. They required 4-wheel drive. They only allowed 4-wheel drive to come up there, and mostly it's tourists that come up to this little tiny village. Lesotho their capital is on the other side of the country, which is about 250 miles away. That's how big it is. And I think there's a lot more population there. Where we came up this little tiny road from South Africa, there was very little population, and mostly they were raising sheep and goats. The highest pub in Africa was in Lesotho, where we were at.
Now, your brother is on the right, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And we shaved our beard a little different, or he didn't shave his beard and I did. And that's how people could tell us apart, mostly by, yeah. After this, we got haircuts in Tanzania, and we we wanted to get the same haircut, but they scalped me and they hardly took any of his. We had two different barbers. Later on, pictures might look very noticeably different.
I think you part your hair a little bit differently too.
Yeah, we do. It was fun looking like twins. We actually have some shirts that are just alike, and so sometimes we dress like twins. It was fun. The Lesotho natives. It's amazing. The weather was not hot, but amazing how people dress so thorough. You know, they cover up, and especially when the weather is hot, people dress very complete, and it's to keep the sun off of them.
Were they Muslims down in South Africa?
I don't think they were Muslim. No. Yeah, I don't know what their religion is. I would guess probably multi-gods, you know, many gods.
If anybody's
Okay,
been feeling warm, here's where you're going to feel cooled off.
yeah. And I had been rafting, whitewater rafting at least twice before and never been capsized. But these rapids were so big. In fact, they hold competitions, world competitions in these rapids. And it really was, once we got capsized, it became terrifying. It wasn't scary until we got capsized. And the place you get capsized is at the worst possible place, where you have water coming at you from 3 different directions, and you're going down maybe 10 feet drop off and head on into a wall of water right in front of you. And you don't just roll up and over it like a surfboard going over a wave. You just get literally thrown. And it was petrifying to be thrown in the water. And you go under, the water's covering you up, and you bob back up long enough to grab a half a breath, and it shoves you back down, and you finally come out of the rapids. And we did have 3 highly experienced kayaks that were zooming around rescuing us, and they'd say, hold on, and they'd take us over to one raft that was the medic, and he'd take care of you until your raft kind of got collected back together. And ours capsized twice. The second time I was able to hold on, and I thought I was going to be underneath the raft, but it toggled around like a coin. You don't know which way it's going to go, and it flipped back down in the correct position. And I was holding on to both ropes, and I still had my oar, and the guide was the only other person still in the boat. And he said, Greg, I need your oar. Okay, you're the boss. He had bent his oar in half, and everybody else was in the water. And we learned afterwards that they had a tourist drowned there a week earlier. And
Oh,
that's when we realized, you know, this really was as dangerous as it felt. And we probably wouldn't have done it if we had known that. But I'm glad we didn't know it, because it really was a great memory to actually go through such Category 5 rapids.
did you
How'd you
take
get
this?
them to pose like that, Greg? Especially that guy on the right.
I know, I know. Yeah,
Did you take this picture yourself?
no, the guys on the kayaks that were there to save us were taking pictures. And some of my pictures I got off their wall, and nobody in our group took a camera on that, because we expected to lose our camera. But the kayaks, they had cameras, and they did take. So I don't recognize the people in this picture, so I think it probably was not our raft. But it definitely was tourists. And the guy on the right, I think, is one of the guides.
Or here's some peaceful shots.
Oh, yeah, that's the watering hole. It's at a campground. There actually was a fence between that rhino and us. At a different rhino sanctuary, not this one, but at one in Uganda that we went to. We went out free, where free roaming rhinos were. They have a whole team of rangers that protect the rhinos from poachers, and therefore they know exactly where all the rhinos are, and they get on the walkie-talkie, and we went out in a Jeep to where there were rhinos, and there was no fence at that particular one. This one, there was, and it was in a campground, and everybody had their beer, and we could go walk up and look at the rhinos as they come in for a drink. And I loved this picture because of the sunset. It was just a beautiful afternoon. In my 4 months in Africa, I expected to not have any alcohol. I thought it would be dry, but shockingly, there was alcohol everywhere. And we had one British guy that, as soon as the bus would park at the end of the day, he'd find beer, and we'd all be getting our tents out, and he'd be coming back with a beer in his hand. It's like, Dave, where'd you get that, mate? So we did have lots of alcohol, and it was kind of fun. This is Zimbabwe, at the Okavango Delta. It's the world's largest inland delta. Most rivers empty out into an ocean, and therefore deltas like Mobile, Alabama, go out into the ocean. But this one empties out into miles and miles and miles of inland, and very few people living out there. The people that were living there, we took Jeeps up a very rough dirt road for an hour and a half to get to a landing boat where they had their kayaks. They call makoros, really are wooden dugout logs, and we rode in their makoros another hour and a half to a very primitive campground. So it was one of the only 3 nights that we didn't have a shower. I expected going to Africa, there wouldn't be alcohol and there would not be showers and toilets. Well, only 3 nights did we not have a shower, but during those times there would be water, whether it was river, lake, there would be some water where we could actually get clean. And they always had a toilet, usually with the building and all. At the Okavango Delta, they had a big camping toilet. It was a regular toilet seat with a big steel frame, and they dug a hole and put us up the loo with a view. And I think we might have more pictures of here in the Okavango Delta in Zimbabwe.
Are most of these sunsets or sunrises? Did you get up that early to be seeing sunrise a lot?
Yes, but this is a sunset. These are sunsets. Yeah, sometimes we'd be rolling before the sun would come up, or as the sun was coming up.
This was a lucky shot. You got the crescent moon up there too.
Yeah. Yeah, and no street lights anywhere to be seen. At night there were no houses for as far as we could see, just the sky and our campfire.
No light pollution, so you could see dark sky and see all of the stars. It must have been beautiful.
Yes, exactly. And you could hear the animals also, which were all around us. And we did not have any kind of fence or anything there. They always had a campfire to keep the animals away, but the animals didn't stay away always. Sometimes they come in, but apparently they think a tent is a giant rock or a giant animal, and they never attacked our tents. They did tell us, don't take any food in your tent, of course, but we never had a problem. And since our rangers and guides weren't afraid, then I couldn't see a need to be afraid either. They would tell us, when you get out at night, shine your light around and look for big game. And if there's big game, stay in your tent. And I'm thinking, yeah, you got to pee. What do you do? Be in a bottle, I guess.
How about pests, insects, snakes, scorpions?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
about small stuff?
Yep, all of the above. The tent comes up about 6 inches to the door, and we never had them in the tent. Although we did, my brother and I were very good about closing it. You don't just leave the tent open, even if you're only gonna be out for 1 minute, because just one mosquito can do a lot of damage. So we'd get out, zip the tent up tight, go do our business, come back and unzip it and get back in again, because, yeah, you don't want it. And as you say, don't want snakes in there either. But even the ants didn't come in. We hardly had any problem. What we did see is in the sky was the Southern Cross. Most of the trip we were down under the equator, and it was a pleasure to see the Southern Cross.
The moon would be upside down too.
I guess it depend on what time of day. But yeah,
Did you take anti-malarial medication?
I did. I took a 1-a-day pill. There apparently is a once-a-week pill, and a couple people with the once-a-week malaria pill seem to get stomach aches. I've taken the 1-a-day pill, antoquarium or something, quite a few times in the past, and I haven't had any reaction to it at all, so I like it. Mosquitoes don't seem to bite me, and I give credit to the malaria pill, even though it's just fighting the disease, but I'm thinking maybe it gives you a smell. But I did read recently that mosquitoes are attracted more to Rh negative blood, and I have Rh positive, B positive is my blood, and I don't get eaten up when other people do. So I don't know why I'm so lucky, but I'm glad.
What I've read is that it's the bacteria on your skin that make compounds that attract the mosquitoes, and everybody's a little bit different in terms of what kind of bacterial farm you got on you.
Good. I like mine. Yeah, we saw this picture. It was in the sand dunes in Morocco. I bought that coat in Morocco. I just liked it really well. I saw a number. It's a very Moroccan coat, and I saw a lot of people wearing them when it was chilly. So I thought, well, I need one of those.
It's wonderful.
Thank you. This is Zimbabwe,
Large river or lake?
a lake. And hardly anybody on the lake. There was some industry, some fish farming. There's two kinds of fish that they farm there. I can't remember what they are. But also from that lake, we were on 2 houseboats. We parked our bus, our bus was on a truck chassis. So the truck driver said, it's not a bus, it's a truck, but it was really a bus. And we went on 2 houseboats, and we parked for 2 nights. And our guides had little power boats. They took us out, and we went big game watching from the water. I'm thinking this is Cape Town, South Africa. South Africa, I actually was a little disappointed in. Hate to be negative. It's because I was expecting too much. South Africa is the richest country in Africa, and yet it was pretty poor and pretty bad roads. Cape Town was my favorite. It was the nicest city and cleanest, most modern, with beautiful highways, and Cape Town is lovely. It's known for Table Mountain. I think Table Mountain is about 2,500 feet. There's a cable car that goes up to it, and it can zip you right up there. Even somebody in a wheelchair could go right up to the top of Table Mountain, and up on top there's miles and miles of trails, rocky trails, and spectacular views in all directions, all 360 degrees that you can see from the top of Table Mountain, and that's probably where this picture is. Those are Watusi cattle. They have Faruni and Watusi are the two main breeds that have big horns. I think I had this picture in a group of Maasai, and the cattle rancher there is not a Maasai. He's wearing, it looks like he's wearing pants and a shirt. Maasai are generally wearing robes, and we'll see more of them. But there was cattle everywhere, all over Africa, and they eat good. We didn't go to any areas that have extreme drought, like northeastern Kenya into Somalia and Sudan. Even the elephants and local wildlife are starving because there's not enough water to support the vegetation. But where we were, there was cattle always, and the people were not hungry. They were very thin. They don't overeat like I think Americans do, but they look really healthy thin, not starving thin. Yeah, more cattle. And they'd be crossing the road. That's an ice cream truck. The guy with the yellow basket open, he's got his music going, the same music as our ice cream vendors. And he just sold an ice cream to that young customer. And the music was still going. It's just precious. Tea, that's a tea plantation. And as labor is far cheaper than machinery, I'm pretty sure they harvest the tea by hand. In fact, they pick the leaves when they're just ripe, and they don't want to pick the ones that need to stay on another week or two. So I'm sure all of those leaves are picked by hand. This is a brick farm, brick factory. Most bricks are not kiln dried. They're just poured, they're adobe with mud and straw and poured into wooden molds. They probably let them set up for a day or so till they won't just fall apart, and then sit out in the sun for another maybe a month. I don't know however long it takes till the bricks are dry, and then they stack them up. A better quality brick is if they get into a termite mound. Termite mounds are harder than cement because when the termite combines his saliva with sand and dirt, it actually ends up harder than cement. So termite mounds are really strong, and they'll break them up and put them into bricks for extra strength. A better quality brick is when they actually use cement and then fire it in a kiln or oven. And that's what this is a factory.
Looks like maybe banana in the background.
Yes, banana trees. Yep. Lumber, timber. South Africa has a huge timber industry, and they call it long-term farming. And they're not just forests. You can look at all the rows are lined up perfect where they plant trees. And they take all the lower branches for the bottom 20 feet off of the tree because it causes the trees to shoot up faster and taller and bigger and stronger and straight, surprisingly straight. They mostly in South Africa, I don't think this picture is South Africa, but where the real long-term farming in South Africa is, they grow pine and eucalyptus because those are fast growers.
You can see here's, I mean, these are obviously sections, but here's complete rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably Tanzania. Tobacco, they have a big tobacco industry. I did not see very many people smoking, the locals. I think it's for export. And I think we'll see a picture of tobacco drying in a barn. Yeah, that might be tobacco, I'm not sure. More cattle. The Maasai are mostly in Kenya and Tanzania. They are known as warriors. They protect their cattle with just a stick. They against lions. They used to kill the lions, but now their countries have asked them, don't kill the lions because the lions bring tourists. So they just scare lions off with a stick, and they are polygamous. They believe in multiple wives, and they purchase a wife with cattle, generally about 6 cattle to buy a wife. And the wives and their families are very happy to have their daughter bought because she's not going to go hungry, and really they won't go hungry either because now they have cattle. Red is their color of choice because it represents bravery and courage. So the biggest majority of Maasai wear red. They also make crafts. Mostly the women are making crafts like beaded belts and bracelets and artwork, masks and wall paintings that they make with beads. So when you see beaded art, it's generally made by Maasai. Their houses they make out of sticks with mud and cow dung. And we went in one of their cow dung houses, and it didn't smell like cow dung because they built a fire inside. It smelled like a campfire, and it was kind of black and sooty all over. Yeah, they raise cattle. And you can see what there is for the cattle to eat. Not a lot of grass, a lot of little scrub brush and bushes. And so they're a little scrawny, but apparently there's enough to get beef out of them to harvest the meat. We didn't see very many dairies. We saw a couple, but really these are beef cattle as opposed to dairy. And in fact, they don't have very much milk and cheese. Cheese was very expensive in Africa. Dairy products, they don't have much dairy products. And we didn't see many chickens or eggs.
Is it characteristic for the Maasai to all have these sticks?
Yep. Pretty much every Maasai man has a stick. And it's to fight off a lion if he's going to try to kill their cattle. They also can jump up real high, and they don't bend their knees. They do it with just their ankles, and they jump about 3 feet high. They really only practice it for ceremony and if a lion is trying to get their livestock. But it's pretty cool to watch them jump 3 feet high with just their ankles. And back to Zanzibar, I guess. They have a turtle rescue. These turtles have been injured, and if they can recover from their injuries, then they'll be put back out into the wild. But here they're in a safe, it's seawater that's coming in. I think it probably just fills this pool up at high tide, and they may have built a little fence or a cage at the end. And as a tourist, you pay an admission price to go in, and they give you seaweed, and the turtles don't bite you. I think if you didn't let go of the seaweed, they'd get your finger, and probably would be pretty serious injury because their beaks are pretty tough. But you just let go of the seaweed and don't have to worry about them biting you in the leg or anything. They kind of nuzzle, push up against you and say, "Hey, I'm here." Just like if it was a bunch of cats or dogs, they're pushing on you, trying to get your attention, give them the seaweed. It was fun. Caribou, it's like a greeting, like aloha. Aloha, this is Zanzibar, caribou. We stayed at a resort for 3 nights there. A lovely place with, they did cultural dancing and a lot of people selling their artwork on the beach. And we went snorkeling. It didn't have very much for coral and tropical fish. We were expecting it to have We did go snorkeling. I was going to go scuba diving, but the snorkeling was very underwhelming. So I didn't go scuba diving. One lady did, and again, she was highly experienced, and she said she was very disappointed. So beautiful waters, but not much for coral and fish. Trying to get dinner, I guess.
Little conversation going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, Morocco, just overlooking a valley where the nomads bring their sheep up.
Squash or
Pardon?
are those round squash or
I think oranges.
oranges?
I think oranges, yeah. Oh, and pomegranates. I see a pomegranate. Yeah, and cashews, nuts. Boy, there were places we could buy a pound of cashews for $4, and I wish I would have filled up a suitcase with them. They were awesome. Coffee, Rwanda. She roasted coffee. You can see 4 different shades. They're all the same coffee bean, but roasted to 4 different degrees, and then they ground them up, and we sampled some hand picked and hand roasted Rwanda coffee. It was very good. This is Cape Town. It's one area of Cape Town. Very, very colorful. The slaves were kept in this neighborhood 100 and some years ago. I think in 1934, slavery was abolished, and the slaves prior to that were required to keep their houses painted white. So the whole neighborhood was white. And as soon as slavery was abolished, and they were allowed to stay in their houses, they immediately painted them to protest the white that was demanded of them. And to this day, it's just a gorgeous neighborhood. Yeah. That's Cape Town. This guy was in Eswatini. He's wearing traditional. He did a cultural. Him and a group of about a dozen people did some traditional cultural dancing for us. Normally they wear Western clothes, jeans and a shirt. He just put on this to show us. And the lady on the right, again, I like their colorful clothes and carrying things on their head. It was just so common in Africa. It's just that's a normal scene, the lady on the right, what you would see in Africa. No, more of the same, beautiful colors. Oh, you probably recognize the guy on the right there. They were
Looks
trying
like
to
the
sell.
Maharishi. What?
Yeah, they're selling the clothes. I didn't buy because I thought I would never wear it again, and I'd have to figure out a way to carry it since I was living out of a backpack. So I had not intended to buy any souvenirs. In the end, I did. The lady on the left, just another typical, got her product on her head and beautiful clothes. Just a wall mural. Lots of beauty. Africa is really beautiful.
If we haven't seen any wildlife before, but that's the first giraffe.
And they'll be in a family of a dozen or sometimes 20 giraffes. Rarely are they alone. The rhinos. Rhinos are poached for their horn. In Asia, there's still belief that the horn is like Viagra. They grind it up into a powder, and it's very, very valuable. In fact, their horn is the same as our fingernails or horse hooves. It's not valuable, and you can saw it off and it'll grow back. But the poachers don't just anesthetize them and saw it off. They kill the animals and take their horn. And in fact, down underneath the skin, there's as much horn under the skin as there is above. So that's another reason they'll kill the animal, so they can cut way down into his skull and get all the horn.
That's an
So-
example of sympathetic magic. The
Yeah.
guys want to make the rhino horn, just like walnuts, are good for your brain because they kind of somewhat resemble the brain. So, just shows how sympathetic magic is still believed in many places in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, old customs are believed. We went into a rainforest in Uganda. We went 2 different places. We climbed up into very tall mountains to see the gorillas. But this was chimpanzees. I think this is the chimpanzees, which was in a different location than the gorillas. And they got real loud, like if you went to a Disneyland ride or the Rainforest Cafe, where the chimpanzees would start making a lot of noise, and they'd get in a real uproar for a minute or 2, and then they'd calm down. Those are Springbok, and they are all staring at some wild dogs. Wild dogs are similar to hyenas, but they are a different breed. And the wild dogs are staring across this large field at the Springbok. The hyenas are, the wild dogs are thinking dinner, and the Springbok are thinking, oh no.
Except there's one that's looking somewhere else.
Yeah, he's thinking, are they going to sneak around and get us from the back, ambush us?
He's a
That
free
must be the
thinker.
eighth. Yeah, there you go. A free thinker.
Yep, looking at a bird or something, female lion. Yeah, hold on, baboons. I don't know what kind of monkey he is. This is at a resort. And if you left something out, he'd be certainly running off with it. That's a dik-dik. It's the smallest of all antelope. I don't know how many different species of antelope there are, perhaps as many as 50, but he's tiny. He's smaller than a medium-sized dog, and he's full grown. Impala. Warthogs, mother and 2 adolescents. And penguins. Who would guess South Africa has penguins? It does not get cold where these are. The next thing south of South Africa is Antarctica, but it does not get cold in South Africa, and yet they have penguins. Baboon. That's my sister. She's 81 and still able to travel. She's given him a peanut, I think. I think that was being pretty brave, since he was not a trained monkey. He was definitely wild. Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Greg. I hope that was fun, recollecting your trip.
Yes.
I think
was
any
wonderful.
school child can watch this and learn a lot about Africa. And we'll just finish up. A couple things that happened on May 14th, 1796. Edward Jenner performed the first smallpox inoculation. Edward Jenner, this British physician back then, is credited with probably saving more lives than anyone else in history, because smallpox would come through and kill 10% of the population. Imagine, with what we just went through with the pandemic, but 10% of people dying from smallpox, and he was the one who developed the first vaccine. In 1878, that was the last trial for witchcraft held in the USA. It happened to be held in Salem, Massachusetts, of all places. It was actually a case involving some guy who was actually an associate of Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. But they had a falling out, and one of Mary Baker Eddy's other, in fact, the guy who was gone after, prosecuted for witchcraft, he had introduced Mary Baker, I forget her original name, but he had introduced her to her husband, Mr. Eddy, and that's why she's Mary Baker Eddy. But he got gone after for using his mesmerist powers to oppress this lady in the Christian Science Church. You'll be happy to know that it was thrown out. Judge dismissed it. And in 1973, Skylab was launched, first space station of any kind, operated, of course, by the United States. I think it was only up for about a year, maybe less. It didn't last long because the shuttle program was not far enough along yet to get up there and boost it to a higher orbit. Brief review of our principles: reason, enjoyment, appreciation, and love. Do think about these, practice them every day as part of your life. Visit us on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, that's what our pages look like. In the top left there is our YouTube channel. Go and check that out as well. We'll have this on it at some point. And when you visit our website, there's a way to donate through PayPal, and we very much do depend on your support for what we do, and we can do more. We always say this is a way to support your values by supporting the NTCOF. We're not out there suing people, but in the marketplace of ideas, so to speak, we can do together what none of us can do very effectively on our own. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day. With the loss of Christopher Hitchens, we really lost probably the most prominent American advocate for free thinking. And nobody's really coming along to replace him, but I think together we can still supply things like this video and all the other videos that we have up on YouTube. There's quite a few of them that have hundreds of views, so we're being listened to, watched by some people, and we request any of us, anybody who comes across our materials, to join us in promoting facts and reason and celebrating doubt. Let's not make such a big deal out of faith. That chafes against me every time I hear that. Oh, faith-based organizations as a synonym for religion. We should celebrate doubt, not faith. Doubt is what gets us to discover new things. Again, it's a feature, not a bug. And supporting our church and joining us in this effort is also a way to demonstrate your commitment and to be the future that you wish to see, a future free of superstition and supernatural nonsense. Elias Facet is our Latin motto. It just means do better. We're not always trying to do better, then what's the point? Thank you and good morning. And with that, we'll move on to any questions and answers and discussion. Of course, we don't always have a lot of answers, but questions are how it all starts, and asking questions in the right way, especially.
I have a question. Greg, you went to a lot of countries, and I'm just wondering how well marked the borders are and what kind of issues you had going through customs from country to country.
We went to 16 countries, and each one has customs and immigration. We had to present passport and COVID, proof of COVID. At one place, it was going into Malawi. The European tourists and Australian in our group and African had a QR code for their COVID vaccinations. We didn't. And if we had known that they were going to require that, my brother and I carry COVID test kits that we can go online and they'll issue us a QR code. And we would take a screenshot in case you don't have internet when you're at the border, and they would have accepted it. but we didn't have one and we were out in Timbuktu. So ultimately, our guide took the immigration person in the back room and gave them $200 for 4 of us. And we each repaid our guide to $50 each. It should not have been required. It was, I think, the graft by the border agents. It was just their way of making extra money. But
That's
you
what
know,
I was gonna ask. Did you
Pardon?
encounter, besides that, did you encounter much in the way of corruption? Because that's supposed to be one of the big factors said to be holding Africa back.
yes and no, not directly. We didn't see it. I think there is a great deal of widespread corruption. And one example, we never lost power throughout wherever we did have electricity, except in the country of South Africa. Africa's richest country loses power every day, sometimes multiple times, for 2 to 4 hours each time. And it's been going on for 6 years. And if they can't solve that problem, they have nuclear and they have a lot of coal generator factories, as well as some wind power stations. I think it's corruption that, really, my opinion of what's going on is the power company is trying to get everybody to just say, I don't care what you charge us, just give me electricity, and then they can raise their price. So they must have regulation on keeping the price down or something.
Well, thanks
I just
again,
had-
Greg. That was a lot
I
of
had
fun,
2
and we're so-
questions for Greg. Greg, I didn't see any beggars. Did you see beggars? When you travel in Mexico or South America, children come up and beg for coins or whatever, gum or whatever. Did you
Yes.
see many beggars?
We saw some beggars, but a lot more than that, you see people selling their goods. Little hand carvings that they've spent a lot of time making. And my brother and I don't believe in giving money to beggars because that there's been a lot of statistics on how that just encourages it. And especially when you see children, they're not going to school because they're out begging. But we did want to buy their hand carvings and things, and they were super cheap. It was just amazing the low price that you'd get something that might have had 100 hours of labor in, and you'd get it for $3 or $5, or maybe even $20. But it was just amazing. So we did buy a lot more souvenirs as a method of supporting the people.
My
And-
last question was, I couldn't help but think whether those women carrying the things on their heads, if they don't have cervical, spine problems later on, but they have pretty good life expectancy. And
I asked a couple people, how long do people live here? And they'd say age 60. So, compared to where there's medicine and better food and especially better water and sanitary sources, I guess their life expectancy is shorter, but 60 is pretty healthy.
okay.
I had a question, Greg, about, did they prepare you in any way of if you had been approached? You here in the States, you hear about all these violent terrorist groups like Boko Haram and all of this. Was there something you were supposed to do if, just in case?
No, when my brother and I were in small tours, we went on about 5 little 3-people tours. We'd have a guide with us at all times. But on the big 2.5 months overland tour, no, they didn't really give us a lot of information. They were wonderful. Our guide and our truck driver were just wonderful and very much a part of our family, as they call it. But no, they didn't give us information. Although almost everybody on the tour was pretty seasoned at traveling, and they didn't take us to where it was dangerous. But now that you mention it, there was one place, Dar es Salaam, is the port that you catch the ferry boat over to Zanzibar. And that is a Muslim area, and it's known for raising terrorists. There are terrorist groups that do their recruiting there, and it could have been a very dangerous place. And so our guide did say, girls, please cover your shoulders and your knees, and guys also cover at least your knees. And yet we had several girls that refused to. They were wearing tank tops and short shorts. And our guide warned them. He said, tourists get acid thrown in their face for wearing that. But we didn't encounter any directly. My brother and I did not want to be part of our group when the girls were acting like that, because they take their customs they'll die for their customs. Yeah, but we never encountered it, thank goodness.
Greg, I was wondering about currency exchanges. You went to so many different countries. How did you have the right kind of money to buy souvenirs or dinner or anything?
We'd go to an ATM, and it would spit out the local currency, and we would try to calculate how much we need. A lot of places will take US dollars. It's the most stable currency, at least it's thought to be the most stable currency in the world. And all over Africa, they'll take US dollars. So we had a lot of 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s available also. But we would go to an ATM and try to get what we thought we would spend in their currency. And then at the end of that country, if we could swap it for the next country without much cost, sometimes they'd only offer you half of its value. And then I would just give it to our truck driver and say, here, have some dinners on us.
That's nice.
And that came out of your American bank account?
Yeah. Yep. You just take your ATM card with you and use it at, and I, for my own security, I had bought a dozen pair of underwear. I buy the thin nylon stuff because I want stuff that'll dry. You can wash in a sink, it'll dry overnight or in an hour in the wind. And I sew up the pass-through area in men's underwear, and I'd cut it open at the top and hem it. So I'd have a pocket, a hiding pocket. And that's where I hid most of my cash, and my ATM. I had 2 ATM cards and 2 credit cards, and I would keep 1 credit card in my wallet and less than $100 of cash in my wallet. So if I actually got robbed, if you tell them you don't have anything, what are they going to do? Knife you maybe? Don't know. But my bigger cash I'd keep in my underwear, and just FYI.
Were you able to use credit card much?
No, in bigger cities you can. In hotels, in big hotels you can, but really cash is what they want, and particularly all the little vendors, little stores, they only take cash.